Hello everybody, I hope you are all well and welcome to my sewing room. My name's Diane. If you're new, each week I try to put a video out about what I've been up to in my sewing room. Usually it is quilt related. If you saw last week's, that was a bit of a chaotic ramble. I seem to have been extraordinarily affected by the effects of the harvest moon. But that's past now and I've slept. All I can say is those people that are super fit and have all that energy, well, must be exhausting because it's took me about 2 days to recover. But during the full moon, I did get loads done. So I've sorted out and tidied my room. I'll show you that in a little while. And I did a job, jelly roll related, that I'd been putting off, and I'll explain that as we go. But I don't know if you did do a jelly roll. Was you involved in National Jelly Roll Day? Did you make a quilt? Did you have a race? I think really that is a fantastic marketing ploy. Whoever came up with that, you know, well done to you, because people who don't normally buy jelly rolls are going out to engage in a race. I mean, it sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? I mean, for me, this is my calm, happy place. But to actually, you know, I'm not sporty. I don't think sporty people make that noise. But, you know, to want to race. Anyway, I didn't do that challenge, but I did finish a quilt that's on the wall. That was made from 2.5-inch strips. For those of you that don't know, a jelly roll, or what do they call, what's the other term? Jelly rolls or pieced sets. I shall edit that pause. But this old age thing, it just sort of disappears, doesn't it? One of the problems I have is I'm facing a window, and in the garden in front of me there's a buddleia bush, and it is just full of beautiful butterflies at the moment. So they keep distracting me. Get back, jelly rolls. So if you're new to quilting, a jelly roll, actually I have two here, often bought like this. So they're always 2.5 inches wide, and they are width of fabric. This one is a solid one, and you usually buy them in themes, so you can have, this one is rainbow theme. Sometimes the strip sets aren't in a roll, sometimes you'll see them in a packet, they're flat, but they're still 2.5 inches. And then you have the patterned fabrics. So this is a batik, and I bought those two because I was looking for small amounts of fabric to go in a quilt where I want lots and lots of different colours. So but they're small pieces, so that will suit me fine. I think the downside of buying jelly rolls is they can be a little bit more expensive than fabric. If you were going to go out and buy yardage, it would work out cheaper, but somebody has to curate that jelly roll. Someone has to then cut it and package it, and so all of that takes time and money. And so I suppose really for me they were worth paying that little bit extra, and you do get a wide variety. That's what I was after in both of those jelly rolls, is a wide variety of colours. So that's all my knowledge of jelly rolls. I think they're a bit, we have a term called Marmite, a little bit Marmite. Some people love them, some people hate them. I'm undecided at the moment, so I'll share with you now the story of this quilt. It is a log cabin, and I made it from 2.5-inch strips. Some were jelly roll and some were yardage. So I just finished the Aphrodite quilt when I received a message from our local project liners, and they were asking for log cabin quilts. And so I looked into my stash where I keep my Project Linus material, and there was very much. I am going to a meeting in October where I shall take all of these quilts, collect some more labels, maybe some more fabric, and so my Project Linus stash is running a little bit low. And so I thought, before I make this, I think I should make a design. I don't usually make a design for a log cabin, but because my resources were quite short, I thought, well, I'll just put something together first so I can count how many strips I need. So it's going to be 16 blocks, so it's 4 by 4, and in the centre of each of the log cabins will be a dark square, and the dark square will be this little piece of butterfly fabric that I've got left over. So they're all different scraps, and each of those will be in the centre of the log cabin. So I put together a little design without really looking at the fabric that I had. Initially, I thought I would have rainbow colours, so I thought in one half of the log cabin I would have the warm colours, yellows, oranges, pinks, reds, and then in the other half of the other blocks I would have cool colours, so blues and greens and purples. And I knew I would like to use quite a lot of brown. There was a lot of brown in that stash. So I knew the background was going to be mainly brown with white highlights in the centre, as you can see now. So far I've finished 4 blocks with the warmer tones. And I've just gone for an off-white with bees on. Now you can see the bees. So there's a yellow background with a black bee on. I had quite a lot of that, enough to do a little piece on all of the 8 blocks. And then there's that tan with the white beehives, and there's some white bees. And the centre is made up of this lovely bee fabric. So now I'm just going to complete the 4 corners in the warmer tones, but they've got a brown background. And so I'd added to my stash the leftover bee fabric that I'd had from other projects, and I started with a warmth in the centre. So I did the centre 4 blocks to start with, and then I did the corners next. And in a lot of my quilts I have half square triangles, and there's a lot of bias, so I tend not to do a lot of pressing when I'm making those blocks. I wait until I've got a good chunk before I press a block. But in a log cabin there is a lot of cutting and pressing and cutting and pressing, so lots of back and forth, which I don't mind. You don't have to. You can have a wonky log cabin where it's all different size strips, or they're not so straight and then you just trim down at the end. That's fine as well. I like those. But in this one I wanted it to be a little bit more precise. And also when you're trying to use up all the scraps, I tend to just make long strips of the same colour. So in some of these edges there will be joins, and what I tend to do is to join the 2 pieces together, press that seam open. I drop the stitch a little bit, so it's about 1.5, so that they're nice and strong. And I also do a lot of chain piecing when I'm making log cabins, because I'm pressing a lot, I'm trimming a lot, and so I'll just put good runs under, and it makes things come together quite quickly. And I was able, with the 4 corner blocks with the red in, to make 4 identical blocks. So all those are the same, the 4 in the centre are the same. What I didn't have was enough to do all of the bluey greens on the outside to be the same. And so what I did was I paired these 2 together and opposite corners. So these 2 here are identical to the 2 in the opposite corner, and so on. So I'd finished all the blocks on the 20th of September, and then I came into my sewing room the next morning, and you can see that's the decision I made. Well, today is National Jelly Roll Day, and so my first task in my sewing room is to sew this together. So I've decided to go with the orange centre. That's really to break up that white. There was a bit too much expanse of white, I think. And it seems to somehow lighten the centre, whereas the other way it made it look a little bit darker. I'm not sure whether that's something you all see or whether that's just me, but that's what I went for. So I started quilting in the centre of the quilt, and I just followed the seam straight down the middle, and then I went and moved along seams where I could. There were some areas where there aren't any seams, and I just really did it by eye, and then I turned it so I did it the other way. I'll show you the back. So the back is this very soft cream. I think you can just make out the quilt in there, and the labels on, so it's really lovely and soft. So I need to get that washed. Oh, there's the label. That's my last label, so I need to pick some more up. So I'm just going to get that washed and dried. It's not raining today, thank goodness. So I'll get that done today, and so then they're all ready to go to Project Linus. And so once this was finished, I thought, I'll tidy up the room, give it a good clean, which I did. And then I thought, well, still with this moon's energy and a move around. So I moved the furniture around. So my table now is opposite the window and lots of natural light coming in. You may have noticed those cacti have gone. They found a new home, don't worry. They kept attacking me. Really spiky. They grew so quickly, so big. They were too big for the windowsill. And also they fell over and they tore the vertical blinds. I haven't told my husband yet. He never watches these. Yeah, so I've got another plant in the corner that's hiding the tear. I've stapled it together actually. Anyway, moving on from that. Oh, before I do, last week when he kept on interrupting, he's not in the house at the moment. He now, when he gets to the door, he taps, rubs his fingers against the door. Sounds like I've got an infestation of mice. That's because I kept recording last week. I do shut the door when I'm sewing because we live in a bungalow and the sound really travels of my sewing machine. So I always have the door closed anyway. But yeah, taps now. You watch is going to watch this now. I'm going to be in huge trouble. Never mind. So I'll show you the room now. And in some of those boxes, that's where I keep my Project Linus stash. So I'm just about to start another big quilt. But when I start a big quilt, I like to have the time to have a good run at it first. And I knew that I hadn't had time to do that. And so I thought I'll just sort out that Project Linus box and I will make some blocks towards the next Project Linus quilt. I sort of half had in my mind that I would make a bar quilt. I thought I might sort out the 2.5-inch strips that are in there, the leftover jelly rolls, and I'd make some different block designs and put them together in a bar quilt. So that's the box I got out. So I've sorted through the box and these are all the pieces that I've got that are 2.5-inch wide strips. All sorts of colours, some of them are joined, some of them aren't. So there's that. And then I have this small pile of 2.5-inch squares, all different colours. Some nice little fussy cut ones, cat, rabbit, all sorts of things in there. And then I've got this small pile here and I've pre-cut these and pressed them, and so they are in small collections of 2.5-inch squares and then 2 strips that are 2.5-inch wide and just under 7 inches long, and so they will make a square within square. So I've pressed and trimmed each of these blocks and they're 6.5 inches square. As you can see, there are 2 seams in 2 of the sides, no seams in the remaining 2. And so when I sew these together, I'm going to sew 2 seams to no seams. So there we have 2 seams, there we have no seams, and I'll put those together and I'll make a row of those. That's the first row and it's 30.5 inches. So at that point I was quite pleased with myself. I love squares within squares, any size. I thought they complemented each other and I was looking forward to doing the next row. And that's when I discovered the mess. This particular jelly roll I bought during lockdown, and it must have been hand cut. Well, it was hand cut or hand sawn. And also it was crooked on where the seams are folded. And also I didn't notice that some of the 2.5-inch strips weren't. It looks a bit jagged on some of them. Those ones I measured, some were over, some were under, so I sorted those, but some that weren't as jagged, you could hardly tell, but when you put them together in a block, it was short. And so because this is a scrappy quilt and I intended not to waste fabric, I just thought, well, it was the pink that was short. I'll trim that up, I'll level that, and then I'll add another green piece to go with that. The intention for that row of blocks was to do sort of rail fence effect. Well, after I've added that dark green strip to the pink just to get it to size, it just doesn't look nice at all. So that didn't work as a rail fence, and so I just altered the orientation of the blocks, and I thought that was okay. Not perfect, but okay. Well, I think that looks much better now. It's sort of an irregular piano key, just a stripe. And then I just put some little 9 blocks together, so 3 squares alternating, but again, didn't like the look of that either. Usually when I come into my sewing room, it's a nice happy place, nice and calm. This is where the good things happen, and I don't usually have a not so good day here, but it's been a really strange sort of day. I've been in here for a few hours and I don't seem to have got very far at all. I've been quite frustrated with those 2.5-inch strips that aren't 2.5-inch strips, and I think I'm going to sew that 9 block up. That will be the start of another quilt at some point, and I like those squares within squares, so I think I might make a green and yellow quilt with those, try and get all the greens and yellows together. And those green and pink strips, I think I might just put those aside, and then I've got those little 3 blocks and they'll just be waiting for another quilt another time. So now I felt much better, and I was quite happy then to put those blocks away because they look quite nice now, apart from that green and pink. That might end up in the back of a quilt. It won't go to waste, but it might just be a pieced back. So then I thought, I'm not going to leave all those scrappy bits of 2.5-inch or less strips in that box. So I went on to sort the box out. Well, I've just spent the last few minutes sorting out all of those strips now, so they are all 2.5-inch wide. And all of these are 2.5-inch square, and these are the square within square sets. So I'm going to tidy away now. So I felt much better then, everything was tidy. I don't always have to work in regular sizes. I can do scrappy quilts and improv quilts and just put the blocks together, but I don't know, there's something about a jelly roll and the conformity of the sizes that sort of calls to me to put a straight seam. So I needed to just tidy up that box, and now I know there's some nice blocks in there ready for a new quilt, and I'll build on that as I go. So the next quilt is going to be based on a log cabin. It's a chandelier quilt, but I'm cutting that from fabric. Oh! If you saw last week when I was showing you some of the Bethany Salt fabric, Layla commented on the community page and said, can I see a woman's face in that dragonfly? So I hadn't noticed, so I had a look and see what you think. So well done, Layla, for spotting that. I have now transferred all of the contents of my Etsy shop over to Folksy. That seemed to go quite smoothly. I haven't encountered any problems yet. What else was there last week? I think that's it. Yeah. So next week I am going to show you how I've got on with this chandelier quilt, and that's it now. I think can't think of anything else. So please take really good care of yourselves as usual. Enjoy your time in your sewing room. Thank you very much for your lovely comments. They were very warm this week. I think there seems to be a pattern. The more chaotic my video, the more you like them. I don't know whether that says something about me or you. Anyway, thank you for your company and I'll see you again next week. Bye.